We're good. Good afternoon and welcome to the special meeting of council of March 24th, 2025. Today we're going to receive a presentation of the capital budget plan. This meeting is being live streamed on the Town of Kentville's YouTube channel, and I call this meeting to order. I note that we do have full attendance of council, so we have quorum. We have one item of business on the agenda today, and it's set. So if I could take, someone could move that, please. Deputy Mayor Kroll and a seconder. Councillor Maxwell, thank you. All those in favor? All right, motion passed. So we've been provided with a 5-year capital investment plan. I'm going to open the floor to Director Matthews here, Director of Finance. I think if she's comfortable, you can ask questions as we go along, if that's easier. And if she can't answer, I guess she'll answer at the end, right, as it comes up. Okay, the floor is yours.
Okay, and I think our CAO would like to make an opening
Yes,
remark.
go ahead, CAO.
Okay, thank you, Worship, members of council. This is a draft capital budget. This is not coming with a firm recommendation from staff at this point. The numbers in it that have been identified as being carried forward, new items, some remediation work are very large. So we think this is going to take some serious second thought. You need to understand. So today what we're going to try to do is get an understanding that council understands the items that are contained in the draft plan. For you to give thought to what each of you think are priorities within that plan. And what we think we can, and then come back, and then probably going to have our strategic planning sessions, one of them, and then start talking about, are we going to focus on replacement? Are we going to focus on new, outside funding? Is that going to be a priority or not? So we've got a lot of second thought coming here, because we know also coming as we start through initial drafts on operating, we've got a lot of challenges on the operating side. So that in effect means we have a lot of challenges here, because we don't have a lot of room in operating budgets to pay out of direct revenues for some of these items. So what we're looking at is, before we get to final voting of these budgets, is that you're more aware of the overall picture and that we have more of an overall strategy. We may not have a complete strategic plan in place, but at least we have some direction from you on where you want us to go with these, as we try to bring it all together in a more comprehensive and coherent package of where we're going with the budgets. So I haven't been involved a lot directly in the development of the capital budget. I've been working on some of the other projects. I didn't want to inject myself too much. I was here to help answer some questions and things, work with Wanda on things, but the finance department's done a great job compiling all the information. I want to thank Wanda and her staff. I want to thank all the directors and managers, many of whom are here today. They've been back and forth. There's been many edits and right up till the end. So they've worked very hard to help get this to you today as well. I want to thank them. And so I'll turn it over to Wanda.
Thank you. The only piece I will add is
Can you keep your mic kind of?
Oh, sorry, it's not pointed in the right direction.
There you go.
Is
Thank you.
that better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Before we launch into the presentation, the other piece that I would like to add to CAO's comment would be, our intent was, as we developed this capital plan, to include any projects that previously were presented to council or approved by council throughout the course of the last several months, to make sure that they were embedded in the process. So if you see we've missed something, although it is a robust plan, if we've missed something, please identify that to us. But I know the director's intent was to ensure that all those pieces were encapsulated in the overall plan. Okay. So it is the first budget for a few folks. So I have just included up here the comment that the capital budget is looking at capital expenditures only. We do define a capital item as an expenditure that really has a useful life beyond a year. For administrative fees, we use a $5,000 threshold. So those would be the items that would come forward. Included in the plan, you will have seen that we have the town general as well as sanitary sewer budget included here for your consideration. Both of those do affect our debt borrowing capacity, whereas the Water Commission is separate from that. So that's why the two of those are presented before you to have that fulsome picture. From a process point of view, as our CAO said, the Finance Department has been compiling the information that has been identified by the departments. We have had a lot of debate and discussion around whether or not there is available or even potential funding for these items, and whether we had the capacity to actually deliver on the number of projects that we've put forward. There are 73 for this year and many more over the course of the 5-year plan. So that has influenced what we've put forward. The ranking is very much the ranking based on how the departments have assessed the situation. As CAO said, we don't necessarily have an overall council priority list, so we couldn't filter it through that. So we did it based on a department by department, and we had collective conversations as a group around how that ranking fits within all of the programs. So those conversations have happened in the background. You will have read in the memo that we've assessed high, medium, and low in more of a subjective way. There isn't an objective measuring tool for that rate at this point. And we also assessed for level of impact on the service. So that is a little bit about how we've pulled things together. We've classified projects and expenditures in 3 ways. One would be replacement and renewal. So that is existing infrastructure having to either refurbish, repair, or I say renew, there's probably another word, when you have to do a major overhaul. And that is really around maintaining the service level we have, not expanding services. We also have some new asset acquisitions and development. You'll see some of those in particular within Public Works and Engineering. However, there are some smaller items that you will see would be classified as new, but they are to augment an existing service, not necessarily to add new service delivery. And of course, we always consider risk as we move forward. So our new asks are limited and are very much centered around supporting existing services that we offer. We can't not talk about some of the challenge that this budget poses. As everyone knows, we're really in uncertain economic times, not only in the province, but across the country and the world, which is making our interest rates and our costs really unpredictable. We've done our best to imagine what's here, but if there are tariffs and other things that come through that impact us, there may be adjustments we'll see throughout the year. It is becoming harder and harder to get people to do work, and costs are escalating. We have tried to incorporate the impact of climate. We've had extreme weather events. Those are more frequent than they have been in the past. Those are being accounted for within the design and the construction documents that we're asking for. So what those requirements might be, what we're expecting of people as we do tenders, those are embedded in there. And we are also making sure that we have contingencies within those cost estimates, as well as having reserves and contingencies for things as they may arise is important. We've been gathering information and recommendations through the Stormwater Master Plan. That's another way that we're addressing climate impact and also trying to minimize unpredictability as we move forward. Those have been prioritized within the plan, so you see a significant investment in those areas in each year. We also know that we have deteriorating roads, and our recreational infrastructure have exceeded their useful lives, which require investment over the course of the 5-year plan. I've also noted, and our CAA noted around our tax rate, our tax revenue. So that is really insufficient to address rising operating and capital costs. I when I looked at tax rates, this is only my second year here, but if I look at 2019, 2020, our tax rate without our area rates, so what we get to keep, was $1.4272, while 2025, 425 was $4.4262. Yes.
So the
Per
rate is
one.
declining?
Yes. From 2019-20, there was one increase and then decrease and then back up. Yeah. So our rates have been stable since 22-23. So our operating budgets year over year, we have done some preliminary estimates, and as CAO said, we need to do more fulsome work. We've been focused on capital, but in looking at our tax revenue, if we were to take our assessed value times the current approved rate from 24-25 and compare that to last year's tax revenue, it's an increase of about $560,000. And our preliminary numbers from school board and our other ISMAs, along with contract escalations and so on, is probably closer to the range of $1 million, which is around where it was last year. Now, that's before any deep dive with staff and our directors. But just to give you a sense of scale, the variation there will be a few $100,000 for sure, probably by the end of that, that we will have to give some thought to as well. So as CAO said, there probably is not much opportunity there without some reprioritization of the services that we offer to invest in some of the capital expenditures that are put forward to you today. Oops. Previous. Yeah. The other piece that I wanted to add is that securing revenue streams is getting more and more challenging, and we'll talk about that a little further on. Grants are very competitive. So overall, we're putting forward a plan that would include for 25-26, $16,977,124, which seems very specific. And that is for 74 projects. And as you can see, a significant portion of those projects are for asset replacement and renewal. 132 of the 173 projects for the 5-year plan are really about just shoring up the infrastructure and the assets that we currently have. The new acquisitions are a relatively small portion, but there is a portion that we spoke about at CAC last month where we have projects that are continuing from this year into next year that we have to keep that funding set aside for those to conclude. And that's around $5 million of the overall plan, which would have been previously approved by council last year. So those are embedded within this plan, so they're not in addition to.
Can I just stop you for 1 second? I should have said this in the beginning. Let's, if you want to ask a question, just put your light on and then it'll be easier. You had a question? Councillor Savage.
I do. Thank you, Mayor, through you, the chair. So with regards to the budget and the recommendations and the percentage of the financing for each of the respective projects, the financing that's recommended, is there sufficient revenue from the operating side to service what's proposed in the budget on the financing side?
That is a good question, and we have details for that on the last slide. It depends on perspective and what year you mean. It definitely jumps up quite significantly over the course of the 5-year plan.
Yes.
And by the end of the 5-year plan, we wouldn't be able to finance the full 5-year plan within the tax.
Yeah, I knew that for the full 5-year, but I was talking more about just the 1-year plan.
So if we think back to what I just spoke about in looking at our overall revenue coming in and what our probable expenses would be, that is without an increase from where we were.
Right.
So there wouldn't be sufficient revenue for an increase in the debt without some offsetting, whether that's an increase to the tax rate or reduction in expenses or finding a new revenue source.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that assumes some other things that we'll talk about when we talk about funding later, but generally speaking, no. Okay. Okay. Excuse me. This highlights just where I said we put in high, medium, and low. Most of the items are either high or medium. There are some that are labeled low in comparison to high and medium. But some of those were items that would have come forward as requests to council. And some of those are things that perhaps we want to do, but we didn't want to make the decision that those are things that you choose not to do by not putting them forward to you for your consideration. So they are there. Our 5-year plan, about 38% are high, medium is 45, over the 5-year plan, if I didn't say that. 45% are medium, although I will say it's pretty hard to predict how many of those might move to high over the course of the upcoming 4 years. We have put forward the summary budget. As you can see, the distribution between programs. So we have only 0.7% in administration, a rather low percentage of the total, 65.2% for engineering and public works, 32.4% for parks and recreation. Overall, for the 5-year plan, if you look at 26, it's 64% engineering, public works, and 33% parks and rec. The main driver in the 64% for engineering and public works would be the expansion at Donald E. Hiltz connector. So that is a $5.4 million component of that. So it does skew the distribution percentage. And we have included in your package a summary document by major category, by department, and then you had details of each individual project. So what we would like to do right now is ask the directors to come up to the podium and just give you a short summary around what it is that is embedded in their plans. I can say for the administrative side, there isn't a lot. There is some there around accessibility for the upcoming year, for the recreation facility, or the recreation, what's it called? Yes, the upstairs, the ramp to get upstairs. I'm not sure what we call that. I want to call it a gymnasium, and I know that's not what we call it, but the rec center, and the washroom. It also doesn't include any anticipated outputs that would come from the feasibility or assessment for the town building. Until we have a better sense of what that looks like, we haven't included any potential costs for that. We have included some additional IT costs because we know that the finance software will be sunsetting over the course of this plan, but we don't have the full cost because we're not really sure what options are available and how that might look. But we have a preliminary $50,000 in for 27 and 28. So those are preliminary numbers. Moving to engineering and public works, Director Bell will give you a short snippet around what's embedded within those asks, if you would. So if you have particular questions on any of those detailed sheets that Dave had, this would be the time to ask those questions, if you wish.
I didn't really prepare any great explanation. Certainly open to questions. As Director Matthews mentioned, certainly the largest ticket item under that $10.9 million public works and engineering public works ask is the $5.5 million, roughly half of the $11 million. So that project, I was away at the last CAC when Ahmed Kadri came to CAC to sort of present that recommendation. I know that didn't go through, I guess, at council. There was certainly wanted to be deferred until this meeting and or the presentation of the stormwater master plan. I can elaborate a little bit on both. Certainly that is a tendered project that closed on February 20th. So we do need by law have to give the contractor some direction on where we're going with that project. We have 60 days to either award or cancel the project from February 20th. So we did tender that project in early February, closing the 20th of February to attract both competitive bids and interest, because this time of year, once you get into the March and April seasons, a lot of the contractors are booking their works or already have booked their projects for the year. So when I brought that, I think in January CAC to let council know we would be tendering it, and it closed the 20th. And I can appreciate that we still need to approve a budget to make an award of that size and nature, but it is a project that we're certainly, I still hope we're committed to, where it's a 73 1/3% funded project, that the town would be, accessing that, only paying the 26 2/3 cent dollars to complete. It's a critical project. There are no, I think Director Baker had the question during CAC, or maybe it was Director Councillor Baker or Councillor Hamilton, about the stormwater master plan. They really don't tie together. They're, the master plan is looking at certainly Kentville as the whole, and looking at our existing infrastructure and our flood prone areas and all of that. This is a new unbuilt, albeit it is a trail road that we've been accessing where our water main is now for the last 25 plus years since that water main went in. It's a project that we have gone to design. We've spent roughly $250,000 to date on the design, the tendering of that project. So the consultant would have reviewed those drawings or had access, more so had access to than reviewed, because they don't really review other firms, design work. That wasn't the scope of the consultant and I don't mean to get too much off topic of the overall capital, but I think it is such a big portion of the ask, and a number that the true number that one of the two projects that we have hard numbers on, that and the AT project. There will be really no great mention of the project in the stormwater master plan, and hopefully that wasn't the thought of council, because it is certainly, it was known to be a project that had to be designed and built to today's standards, and that is what was designed and tendered. So we will be looking still for obviously, either depending on what comes out of today's meeting, and whether, when we streamline this budget, that one certainly is in the high zone, where it is, a committed project, albeit by the previous council, a project that we took the ICIP funding for, and has had a resolution of council to complete the project. And I feel certainly is a necessary project, both from a stormwater management and a water distribution and transmission operational need to in the next year's phase replace the end of life water tank in the business park. That's part two of this $6 million. The remaining 3.3 will complete the water system out inland from the current water tank. But that is certainly this is phase one, phase two next year, to wrap up in the 2027, really the 26-27 fiscal year, which is just next year. So that's the biggest part of the project, or the half of the $10.9 million list. It certainly is a large list. It has everything from the AT component, which was also the other ICIP project that was tendered just a few weeks before the Hilts Road. That did go to January's CAC to award, and that project has been awarded as well. So that is again a project I would have to rank in the high and the already committed part of our 25-26 capital projects.
Director
the 811. Go ahead.
Just Councillor Savage has a quick question, I think.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to the CAO. At our last CAC meeting, did we not, when Ahmad brought that forward with respect to the storm and access road construction, did we not approve that at CAC for ratification at March Council? I thought we did.
Okay. I wasn't here, and I'm glad.
Didn't we?
If I just rambled on for 10 minutes, I apologize.
That's okay.
I thought it got, sort of tabled.
No?
But if it did not, then
Well, we were trying to, yeah, it is there as a recommendation to council, but we're trying to get as much information we could in the
Right.
meantime.
Okay, I just thought
Okay.
majority approved and then it'd be ratified.
If that's the
again.
case,
Yeah.
then hope so, and certainly we've told the contractor, they've certainly, it is such a big project.
Oh, yeah.
For them, they want to know if, A, they need to order materials and book their time, and also whether they should be bidding on other projects to fill in their construction season if this one, for whatever reason, doesn't go ahead. The bulk of the rest of the projects range from sidewalk work, the $1.5 million line item you see there. I'm kind of going by size of projects. That's Main Street project that we were successful in the application for a 2-year. Alicia, tell me the acronym GRID again.
Growth, renewal, infrastructure.
Sorry to put you on the spot. So yeah, we were successful. That's what we identified as end-of-life storm sewer and sidewalk is this south side of Main Street, essentially from the post office, roughly Old School Street, this way all the way to Prospect, this side of the road. It isn't just sidewalk, it's storm sewer under that sidewalk where the curb is that's failed. And then at the same time, we have applied for under streets, I think that's included in that 1.1. There's $1 million of that 1.1 is a provincial initiative that I mentioned at previous CAC to apply for 50%. We applied for 500. The budget line is $1,500,000 to repave. We all know certainly got some end of life beyond the patch paving world of our streets. We will be looking at full width replacement. $1 million doesn't go that far, but we would try to do it in the same area as the first phase of the GRID program, which is, we're thinking, sort of the low spot is where you would start your storm sewer replacement would be sort of in front of Town Hall here, because it goes uphill towards Prospect and uphill towards Church or Masters Avenue. You would get about 1 kilometer at best of replacement. So you'd start with the curb and storm sewer and sidewalk and finish with a full width repaving of that section of Main Street, including the first few hundred feet of Bridge Street, essentially to Webster, where it's also in bad condition. You could pick several other spots across town, but we will continue to hopefully tap into that 50% funding from the province to continue to repave streets as we go. Their money can include things like curb, but if you dip into that, you're going to do less asphalt. So we're going to look for other sources like the GRID to do curb and sidewalk and storm sewer replacements, and then do those same areas with asphalt in the same construction season. Sort of not a double dip, but at least 2 sources of funding to do one area and call it done. You can say all that, but it still does mean that there's decades-old water mains and sanitary sewer under that in the middle of the road. But you know, there isn't the funding to do that at this point in time and still get a decent. The end of life is the curb and the storm sewer. The sewer and the water, sanitary sewer and water, is still haven't been for the most part troublesome. So we're going to rebuild at least a new lift of asphalt on top of those sewer and water mains. Other items from flood mitigation, they can flood mitigation and storm sewer kind of are 2 different groupings, but they're somewhat the same, and they do vary in priority, high, medium, low, and into fiscal years. We haven't received, of course, the final report from Dylan on the town-wide storm study. They've taken back we've been staying out of the report essentially because it is an independent study, but we did review with them just a week ago their 90 or 95% draft, and they were just going to fix a few typos and get that back to us and work on a on a presentation. The report is nearly done, but they need to work on sort of a half-hour presentation to council that we're looking to do as early in April as possible. I think Kevin will be reporting that to you, to whether that's a special off-site meeting at the fire hall or some other venue. But we just put a $500,000 holder in there for this fiscal, but have put an aggressive $2 million in the next 4 years of the 5-year plan, and either called it at one point we called it Dillon Stormwater Priorities, and I think Director Matthews renamed it to just the Stormwater Priorities for the next 5 years. Other projects are the large culvert out on Park Street. Mitchell Brook is end of life. That's been in our plan for a couple years now. I have consultants actually coming up on Thursday to look at that with us. Public Works were there today to do just some regular maintenance and clear it out, and it has failed worse over the winter, especially on the sidewalk side of Park Street, where it was extended roughly 20 years ago with a different material, and just the weight of the sidewalk has caused more failures. So that's a large project. Rules have certainly changed with Environment and Fisheries on brooks and the size and the type of construction that they want for true named water courses. So that will be a much larger single structure, probably almost like a box culvert. What's currently there now is 2 pipes that were appropriate for the day, but you can't even use 2 pipes anymore to do a true brook crossing. It has to be one structure. So I don't know what else I missed on some of the items. Mentioned the downtown sidewalk phase 3, that is the Green Infrastructure Funded ICIP project. That will be starting, as early as May, where that one was approved at a previous CAC. There's some other projects in there that were ranked low, and truthfully, we just brought them forward. We tendered them last year, such as a bike shelter / washroom over on Station Lane. Prices are what I feel ridiculous for the size of the square footage of a structure. So that one, we've brought it forward to council to say that last year's price that we deferred was nearly $200,000. It was $185, I believe, and we budgeted $200. But I would even recommend looking at other options rather than spend that sort of money on that size of a structure. Spring Garden Road is another storm sewer project that is in a high priority list to deal with localized flooding on that street and the properties upstream. So it's an aggressive budget, but it has certainly some high priority items. I guess the last one I'll touch on is the street sweeper, which again I brought to council. I believe that was actually prior to some of your elections. So that was 23-24. That was the previous council. Some of you were still on. So that we brought forward again, but that has been ordered, and we expect delivery of that piece of equipment end of summer, early fall. So that again is committed money that's in the capital budget. And I'll stop there.
You have something you want to say? Or?
I just wanted to make sure he mentioned the street sweeper.
Okay,
Yeah.
he did.
Okay.
You did, Dave.
Caught it. Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Director. For someone who's not prepared, you brought it all up. I gotta say, I have a couple questions. Deputy Mayor Kroll.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director Bell. Am I correct, and my understanding is correct, that Donald Hills Connector must be started this year, or that we lose our upper level government funding?
It doesn't have a hard start, but it has a hard finish. And
Okay.
to be realistic, to be done by 27, which is really the 20. They said that they would probably extend us into the 27-28 fiscal. So really, we're in 25-6, of course. We see construction happening in 25-6. The water system work of the new tank that I mentioned happening in next year, 26-27, and then just tidying up deficiencies and things in the 27-28 final year. So we really have budgeted. It is heavy, but the phase that would have to happen essentially all at once is that 5.5 that you see in this year's town portion. There was a 1 point. I'm actually bringing it to Water Commission 2 days from now. I don't have it right in front of me. 1.2 roughly million portion of the water in that same tender for this year, and then a very small $36,000 component from sanitary sewer. So overall, it was it was 6.65, I think, the award that went to this previous CAC.
Okay, thanks.
Like I'm echoing.
Close, yeah.
Councillor Andrew.
Just a couple of questions. One is I noticed two distinct projects on Prospect that involve paving and curb and sidewalk. And I can't recall whether those were medium priority.
The one is under expansion, I believe, am I correct, Director Matthews, that we had,
There's one under sidewalks.
sidewalks is certainly right up,
Yep, the 222.
both were in last year's capital plan and were tendered. The curb and sidewalk portion is on the lower, what I would call the lower end of Prospect here, where the road is in very poor condition. But in particular, the curb and sidewalk is the portion sort of right uphill from where Church Street here meets Prospect. Curb is essentially non-existent in that area, and the steepness of the street brings surface water on heavy rain events down that steep road across onto private property. So it's about 4 or 5 properties that are affected by the lack of curb. When we do that curbing, that would be sort of covered under stormwater management. We would in turn replace the failing old asphalt sidewalk there behind it. So it's a mixture of curb, storm sewer, and sidewalk renewal on that part of Prospect. That was a sort of a canceled project from last year when some early prices came in, and then we expanded it for a few hundred feet farther to capture all those properties. The other item is under
Streets.
expansion, I think, under
It's
streets.
under streets, and it's the Prospect Avenue extension.
And it's 132.
Correct.
That is a tendered project that the same contractor that did sidewalks on Belcher Street and the repaving or the top lift of asphalt on McDonald, Henry, and Brayside was included in their tender. And just the time of year, we deferred it end of sort of fall of last year to push it into this year. So actually, that is an awarded project. The 132 is tendered and awarded, and we're kind of committed to that contract. So that one I would have to rank high, where we asked them to carry their price for last year's 24 contract into this fiscal year.
Maybe as we move forward in this, that matters that are already tendered and underway, that we could have,
Yeah, I think,
have that clarified.
They are, certainly on some sheets of Director Matthews, but I can
Further, yeah.
yeah, further ahead.
And just one other question, with regard to the main sewer replacement, I'm just wondering what percentage of funding is, because I don't think it indicates the grid funding.
Grid is 50%, up to 50%. We could spend more, of course, but we were successful in half, that half funding, when I say half, 50% funding of the 1.33, so we were 650 funded for that. That was the maximum provincial funding for the grid project. So we are successful on that, on the 50% of the 1.33.
Thank you.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Director Bell. So thank you for this, Director Bell. It's very comprehensive, and I think we're certainly long overdue for Prospect and Apple Tree and Spring Garden. So I like that you touched on a lot of the ones that maybe we were going to do, but we didn't do in the past. So
Correct.
It's very robust, and I think it's very good. The Stormwater Master Plan 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and I think Director Matthews, you touched on it, but when you have forecasted sort of 2 million per annum in those next 4 years after this one, that's not necessarily on the high side, it's probably more so on the lower side, I would
Realistically,
suggest.
they've got millions of dollars that, certainly we will try to
Sure.
apply for. Alicia's applying for some funding now for one of them, even proactively, because there's a
Yeah.
program out now that was due, I think, today or tomorrow.
The expression of interest.
Expression of interest, thank you,
Okay.
Alicia. So, yeah, we're looking for funding now, as
Okay.
it wouldn't be for 26 or 25.
Right.
Director Matthews has me now saying 26 for this
Yeah, I
year.
know, right?
25-6,
Yeah.
but it's a
26-7.
26, 27 construction
Yeah.
season, but the expression of interest is out now for that, so we'll continue to look for things, but, again, we haven't received the final report from Dylan, but, the preliminary one that we did see certainly had, millions of dollars,
Yeah.
of future spends.
I personally don't see anything in your section that could be clawed back, so thanks, that's all I wanted to say.
The downtown washroom would be my first one,
Oh,
and maybe some improvements
maybe we
to,
could-
maybe one or
we could
two of the
rent
improvements to
somewhere.
Public Works, although,
Yeah,
they're all necessary, for sure.
sure, yeah, thank you very much.
The rather low dollar value in comparison to some of
They
the
are.
major expenditures. Yeah, great.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Director Bell, for answering my question about, I guess my clarification was that the Donald Hiltz connector code that we're building to obviously includes flood mitigation or stormwater mitigation. I'm unclear as to how the master plan has taken into consideration Hiltz, because I see, well, okay, why don't you start with that, and then I have some other questions.
Right, start with,
So when
yeah,
we see the
we
plan-
commissioned a design, certainly, even before we commissioned the stormwater master plan, and that design, looks at the entire up and downstream, components that flow into and flow through, the Hiltz Road, the unbuilt Hiltz Road, or the currently, travel way of the Hiltz Road. So those designers, are looking at, certainly industry standards to do what they need to do, with stormwater management, the proper size pipes, the proper erosion controls, the size of the rock, the type of brook crossings, because there are some named and unnamed brooks that cross under that corridor. And that design was what we tendered in January, closed in February, and are looking for the award. Dylan, realizes we're doing that. That is new current engineering design, and they aren't focusing on that as part of their stormwater master plan, because it's being done by, a different consultant, but they're looking at existing, issues and failures and upgrades to our system that need to be done today that are causing problems. At the Hiltz Road,
Is assuming that.
isn't it causing the problem, but
Yeah.
it's something that's been there, for 25 years, I guess, again, and there were construction culverts put in, and they were put in, for a service road, but not sized appropriately. We've had some washouts, and, the work, I stress that work, when that gets underway, will fix, so many of the issues that are in that corridor. They're not going beyond the 100-foot, strip of land where we're going to, be building that funded, road. And this isn't road construction either. This is putting in the underground, infrastructure, water, storm sewer, a little bit of sanitary sewer, and then stormwater management, ponds and control structures and erosion control measures to certainly improve things downstream. It's not going to fix everything downstream, because it picks up, area and volume, capacity, and steepness as it continues to go down towards the lower elevations of town. But what's happening on the Hiltz Road certainly will only improve matters, and then there'll be other things in Dylan's study that will look at, the steepness of the flowage behind Condon or parts of Park Street, or any of the issues that impact the areas of West Main and all those things. But they aren't focusing on this newly designed project.
Because I think of the homeowners that live 100 feet from the Donald Hills connector. Is that Queen Mary Court or Queen Court?
Queens and even
Queens.
part of McDonald Park Road.
Because their flooding has come from the existing Donald Hills connector, and I'm hoping that will improve
That's,
not having their backyard wash away and wash down.
having a new south interceptor ditch on the high side of the Hiltz Road is what, and the proper size, you know, it sounds like we're putting in bigger pipes, it's gonna make it get there faster, but that isn't the idea. It's to, there's stormwater ponds and things that
I
are,
believe
that
there's
are
3 or
gonna
4.
make that a much better
On
situation.
that same discussion about Dillon Consulting, and I don't see it in the capital investment plan spreadsheet, there's a $500,000 ask for Dillon Consulting to provide.
No, sorry, that, and that's, if that's confusing, that's something we, I think,
Wanted
Director
to
Matthews
put
and
a
I
line through
changed,
that,
but.
or-
It just
we-
says stormwater master plan
That's not for
priorities.
them to do anything with, that's
No.
recommendations that make them out of their report. They're not doing design for us either,
No.
they're, you know, they're making recommendations. If they say we have to do, you know, I'll use the example as the end of life, crossing out on Park Street, which is Mitchell Brook under Park Street.
Yeah.
They'll say, you know, we agree this is, should be one of your priorities to replace this culvert, go get it designed. The 500,000 isn't for design for Dillon, it's to fund infrastructure projects that would come out of
Oh,
their
okay, so
report.
it's not going back to Dillon
Not going back
again.
to, yeah,
Okay,
and that's why Wanda, Director Matthews changed, I think, that in one of them to take out
I did,
Dillon,
say
because,
stormwater master plan phase 1, because
Yeah.
it would be the output recommendations of the plan and how we
yeah.
implement
And that's,
those.
we,
Oh, okay,
that
because
we
it
would
just
be
says
including.
TBD on my page.
because we
Yeah.
haven't, you know, we haven't adopted their, or even received their
Yes.
study yet, we
Okay.
put 500,000 in for this year and 2 million for each of the next 4. Those, again, isn't money going
Yeah.
to Dillon, that's to go to build.
Oh, I
To
understand.
build projects, so
I
it's
understand.
5 and the 200 are all in the same category.
Okay, and speaking of that 2 million for flood mitigation, if we turn the page to page 8, on top of each one of those years is another 400,000 for Main Street Bridge and future storm sewer replacements. So is it, I guess I'm trying to understand whether it's a $2 million ask or a $2.4 million ask. One's flood mitigation and one is
Storm
future storm sewer
Storm
replacements.
sewer work is, Main Street, there's in year
Yeah.
3, there's Main Street, or year 4, there's
Yep.
Bridge Street, or
Yep.
year 5, there's future replacements of 400. We try to keep at least that much in, you know, for any known failing storm sewer systems, and that isn't necessarily flood related, that's more infrastructure, you know, end of life on Main Street, because
So that your
the
standard
the old clay pipe on Main Street or galvanized pipe is end of life, and even that, again, isn't necessarily what's gonna come out of the stormwater report. That's just, we always have amount of storm sewer in our 5-year plan to replace.
Thank you, I
as
just
needed.
wanted to understand that
Okay.
you obviously were pre-planning for those things as
We
life
do
goes
every-
on, and
yeah, we
then
do
now that
every-
we've got that, we're asking for
We do
another
every
2
year.
million.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. You're welcome.
All right, thank you, Director
Okay.
Bell.
We good?
For shoot. Sorry.
Oh. You have a question for Director Bell? Director Shoup, we're gonna switch. Guess you're not off the hook yet.
Wait in the wings.
Yeah. Councillor Hamilton.
Just one more question there, sorry.
No problem.
The last, CAC that we were at, or council, I'm not sure which one, it was noted that there is 6 kilometers of road to be fixed. Is that 6 kilometers of road that is in really rough shape, is that put over the span of these 5 years? So that it includes all of that, or it was noted that we were gonna do 1 kilometer of road? So is that 1 kilometer of road going to get done according to this year?
Right.
And then we have 5 kilometers that we need to put over the span of these 5 years, or what?
At least that much. I think Park Street and Main Street, trunk 1 alone, is somewhere in the 6-kilometer range of it. Is that accurate? And then we have other provincial trunks like Bridge Street all the way from the corner here up to the town line, which is also considered a provincial trunk road, which we've done all the maintenance on the last 25 plus years. We used to receive some funding from the province. They don't know how long this program will continue, but they this year alone, just this year, they had 6.1 million, you know, sounds like a lot of money, but that was for the entire province, to mostly for towns like ourselves or Wolfville or Berwick doesn't have a whole lot of trunk roads because trunk 1 really goes south of Berwick, but the towns that have these provincial routes, so we apply for 500 to match to do $1 million, and $1 million won't get you much more than a kilometer these days, especially if you have to include anything like curb or storm sewer, and they all qualify I think they limit the size of the storm sewer, so we're not gonna really apply for, like as I mentioned, for any storm sewer under that program, just really stick to the milling and the repaving. But we could certainly end up doing a 10-year plan in order to do the 6 of trunk 1 and 4 more of the other routes. I mean, Chester Avenue is also Route 12, so it's fortunately in pretty good shape because it was just rebuilt in 2015. So starting to see a few cracks, but overall Chester's pretty good. But I hope that partly answer your question, but it's going to take several years to do.
So is 1 kilometer this year enough, or should we be doing more? Like, you
Well,
say it's gonna go over 10 years.
Yeah.
So then, like, do you kind of have a master plan in your mind with where you're going with that, so that eventually, like,
We probably will do more.
they're in really rough shape?
We will probably do more the milling and replacement as we get out of the real downtown area. As you get out farther into Park Street, you have curb on one side and a narrow road. In the downtown, we essentially have 4 lanes of traffic, where you have the 2 parking lanes and the 2 travel lanes. So we're 40 feet or better. It would make sense really to do it from curb to curb. And while we're doing the curb on this side of Main Street was the area that we decided to match, or we recommend that we match the paving with the recurbing. Yeah, we certainly could do more, but it would be, we applied for $500,000 funding to do 50/50. But if that's the wish of council to do more, then we certainly can. It'll take a long time to do it all, and I think, certainly even the full paving, we will start here and work our way both ways, but there'll be some spots on Park Street where we can't just patch anymore. We'll have to mill out, the tire lane areas where patching isn't lasting, is not getting us through the freeze thaw cycles of winter and the truck traffic, and they'll have to be milled out. So that's an operating question as well, because really, and I mentioned that, or I talked about that with Director Matthews. Can we capitalize not full repaving if we're looking at things like milling out sections that are the worst areas, not full width. But Park Street's a great example where you have the rumble area, essentially where your tires are traveling. We always consider that to be operating, and can you capitalize that? And we didn't add it to our capital plan, but we could mill out. You are extending the life of the asset by doing so, which I guess satisfies capital requirement, and you're certainly spending more than $5,000. But it's always been an operating expense, and we're certainly already, that's one item where we're over budget on even last year's operating patch contract. I think we budgeted 180, and we're certainly well over the 200 mark in what we patched in 2024. So coming up in our operating budget, we will probably be looking for maybe even a little more to spend this year on patch paving, because we'll be taking it a little farther and milling and repaving the worst of the areas that won't get that full width repaving job.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Director.
Guess I wasn't done, was I?
No.
No, well, this is following the councillor's question. We will be patch paving the rough areas out, so that even though we're not fully paving them this year, they will get smoothed out a bit.
They'll get smoothed out, yes. And we did more of a thinner overlay, and in some winters and some years that works well, and this year it really didn't. A lot of that raveled off, but it's failure. It's farther down. It needs to be milled out. So you're going to pay, what you certainly be able to do a whole lot less in 200,000 than what we could do in coverage-wise, what we've done the last few years in that 150 to 200
But they
range.
won't stay looking like they are right
They won't
now.
stay. They won't stay that way. No.
I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Even to get going, to get the worst of them done, even though those are some of the areas that we're looking to totally repave, like from here towards Chester. We'll have to mill them, and do some milling and patching under operating, and then some of that area, unfortunately, is the area that is identified as the best area to do the full width repaving. So we don't like to do it certainly twice in the same year, but some of that could happen just to get through the early spring, early summer timeline.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I guess you're off the hook now.
Okay, thank you.
Director Shu.
Good afternoon, Council. Fairly limited capital program to represent today, so I'll be short with my words as well. Our ask this year doesn't vary significantly from last year's, first of all. Basically what we're looking at is downtown beautification. There's a bit of an additional tree budget, basically to complete the streetscaping that occurred last year during the sidewalk program that was initiated. So that's really our main area of ask here, of additional ask. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Director Shoup? Not a one, I guess. Oh, there's one.
Oh.
Just kidding, no, just kidding.
Over to Chief Smith.
Good afternoon, Deputy Clerk, CAO, Council, and Mayor. I'm presenting, I think it's 5 capital requests. In total, 4 of them are, or I should say 3 of them are replacements. 2 of them are new to us. The first 4 I'll discuss are of high priority ranking, and then the last one is medium. So the first one is pretty straightforward. It's our marked police vehicles. We have 3 marked vehicles. We rotate them on a 3-year rotation, and 310 is due for that change. I said this, I should go back and say we had, for the new council that are here and are not aware, with policing, we have to go through, under the Police Act, we have to go through the Board of Police Commission first with our capital requests and operating budgets. We did so with our capital request last week, and they were unanimously passed. So before I forget that, I'll pass that along. But to touch on the marked police vehicle, I did mention this in our commission meeting. Yeah, I've been here 26 years, and I think we tried once to not get a new vehicle. And in the end, it ended up costing us a lot more money because it was in the shop a lot more. So it doesn't pay to not get the vehicle. And then that vehicle that comes out of commission is traded in, and usually an allotment, I put down $8,000 as an allotment for trade, but last year I think it was a fair bit higher than that. But that was based on the dealership that we went with, but anywhere from 8 to 12, 8 to 14,000. Keep continuing on or wait? Okay. Second one is again replacement. It's level 2, level 3 body armor. So level 2 is currently what I'm wearing right now. It has a 5-year expiry. It has to be replaced, and I'm putting this out there basically because it's a liability issue. If it's not replaced and something happens and we get shot, we're not covered. Every 5 years, body armor has to be replaced. The level 3 is the same idea, only the difference with the level 3 this year is now they've increased it to a 10-year warranty. But level 3s are what we use when we carry our carbines, the high-risk situations where the level of use of force is higher than what we carry, okay? I should say the amounts, do you need, no? They're up there.
Everyone has a copy of the detail.
They have it? Perfect,
Yes.
okay. The third one, again, is end-of-life replacement. So currently we carry a 6-hour pistol. We've been carrying them for, I've had this one since early 2000s. They come to the end of their life. The other agencies have already transitioned to the P320, and that's what we're looking for. That comes with a lot of benefits, being able to adapt the pistol to the user, as well as red dot sights and lights, which are all new additions to what we currently have. The current pistol that we have is, as I mentioned, coming to end of life. They're not making parts for it anymore, so if we can't fix and repair them, then they're a paperweight. The next capital expenditure is our Safekeeper Evidence Drying Chamber. This is a new request, one that we should have had many years ago. Currently we utilize a ident room for drying. If we go to a scene, there's blood or bodily fluids and we need to sees this evidence, we need to dry it somewhere. In order to do that, we've done that in our ident room, which OHS-wise, not a good idea, among other reasons. But currently, we've priced 2 drying chambers, which this was a question that was asked at the commission meeting, you know, size-wise, do we need 2? Could we justify just having 1? They're not very big units, so if you have a scene that's any amount of items that are seized, you have to have the ability to be able to dry them, and this does that in a safe manner, as well as maintaining any of the evidence. And I think Director Matthews mentioned tariffs, right? You did say that. Okay. I don't know why anybody would say tariffs, but. And our last ask is, it comes in as a medium request. This is something that's changed a lot. Organizations are going to technology to do their jobs, and the request is for a drone. We did look at sharing this cost with the local organization, which we were hoping was going to come through, but didn't. We have reached out to other organizations that do have these, and they're quite beneficial in many ways. I know it might seem like, okay, I think it's a $57,000 ask, which includes the equipment, training for up to four staff members. And I would just point out, so our deputy chief did the presentation on this. I said, we're gonna ask for it. We need to have a presentation because people are gonna say it's a drone. Do we really need a drone? It's very beneficial to have in many ways, and I can think of just one incident that if it saved a child's life that was lost from school down along the riverbank and we can't locate, if we have the ability to do this with a drone much quicker than we can on foot, and we've done this on foot, that cost alone is worth the price of the drone. There's many other avenues that we use it for. We can use it for accident scenes. We can use it for high-risk calls, crime scene analysis, disaster recovery, tactical operations. There's many uses for it. As I mentioned, the deputy chief did the slideshow presentation to Police Commission on it. A lot of discussion was had. It wasn't just a quick pass. It was a very in-depth discussion. And if you should have any questions on that, I will direct those to the deputy. That is all 5 capital requests.
Thank you. Any questions for Chief Smith? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Chief Smith. Just on the question of the drone, I know that when agencies overlap, you share resources. Just got to ask, is there any chance of revenue generation with the drone operation?
No, this was asked in Police Commission as well, and I would suggest not, no.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I guess you're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Director Langell.
Hello, Mayor and Council. So for my part of the presentation, I thought it might be useful just to break down kind of the major projects that is making up this budget. So for our 5-year ask from Parks and Recreation, we're looking at just shy of $16 million. 92% of that ask is between 6 projects. 4 of them existing from previous budgets, which is a Field 4 and the track turfing for $3 million, KCA Playground for $500,000, Oakdean Park washroom for $500,000, senior field lighting for $750,000, and then the 2 new ones are the arena, which is coming from the conditions assessment feasibility study. That's just over $9 million, which is 56% of the total ask over that 5-year period. Just to note that there's no accessibility upgrades included in that. And this is just to keep it operating as is. And then finally, the pool for $995,000. So again, when we're looking at all of these projects, believe me, I know it can be exhausting to look at. We put them all together. It is the major portion of it is 6 projects, which I think might be helpful for council to review as when you're coming and looking to for your priorities in the future. A lot can be changed through these 6 projects. Looking at just a quick breakdown each year, looking at 25, 26, we're looking for 5.6 million. 93% of that is coming from the pool and the arena. From 26, 27, just shy of 2.5 million. 88% of that budget is being made up by 5 projects. That's the arena, the pool, the senior field lighting, the parking lot paving, which is the long strip of the parking lot west of the VIC, the Visitor Information Center. Kind of looks down on top of the Pee Wee field and the softball field. And then $100,000 from AVMBA for the second year of projects. 27 and 28, there's 2.825 million. 97% of that budget is between 3 projects. Again, that's the arena making up the large portion, opening park washroom, and then the Eves Hollow structural replacement and re-landscaping for 125,000. That's looking at putting a new retaining wall along the parking lot, new trail, and some other refurbishments in the area. And then finally, 2029, 3.6 million, 99.4% of that that ask is between the soccer field and the arena. And then finally, 2930, 2 projects, the arena and KCA Playground. So the KCA Playground is past its useful life, and 2030 will be our Access by Design 2030, where we need to ensure that our spaces are accessible. So just to summarize, I think I've said it 4 times, 6 projects make up 92% of this ask for the 5 years.
Director Langell, just one question. I note on here for the arena, you have the condenser. Was that not under warranty, or do we know yet?
We heard back that there was a 12-month warranty.
Okay.
So we've asked for a face-to-face with the company for Friday.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And with this work to the arena, I think it was a little under 5 million. What will that give us? Like, I know it's going to be this, nothing's going to change, but what would that buy us? Do you have any idea? Like,
if we do everything that's included in the conditions assessments, another 25 years is what the consultant said.
I mean, if we spent this 5 million, the 4 points, but it would stay obviously going to look the same.
It's going to look the same, but you have to do everything within within the condition assessment, which is nearly 17 million.
Well, the 17, okay.
Yeah, so that's not over. It's over 10 to 15 years.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So over the course of this plan, we have 9 million.
Okay.
For the 5 years.
Correct.
But this year alone, I think it was 4.5.
This year alone,
or something, wasn't it?
4.75.
4.75, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And within that 5.2, there is some wiggle room for projects as well. This is everything that was brought forth by the conditions assessment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Director Langell? Councillor Hamilton.
So for the pool, that was 500,000 for this year, and then next year is another 400 and, I'm not looking at it right now, 490.
495.
495. What is in that section, and is that, do we have to redo some of the things we did this year? Like,
So for the following year, it'll be the weeping tile, it'll be the filtration system. There is, Nick, what else we got? What's that? There's the weeping tile, the filtration system.
Pressure.
Tile, filtration system, and
Pressure
there's
test.
there's a few safety items.
Right.
Like the doors, the foam, those sorts of things.
and so the safety items are not gonna be there that first year?
Well, the door would be for getting the filtration system inside. So we'd have to extend the doorway, so put a new door in to be able to get a new filtration system inside. The OHS issues would be the emergency button and the phone. Those are going in this year within that 500,000.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Director Langell. So under the arena being the 4.7 million, if I understand you correctly, in order to keep it open and operational and compliant, I'll call it compliant, the items that you have listed here for the 2025, 2026 year are all necessary, correct?
Not all of them. What's listed here is what was provided by the condition assessment.
Yes,
feasibility
at the
study.
end of the report. Yeah, I saw
There's
that, yeah.
about, somewhere around $2 million that's required, just shy of 2 million, to keep it operating.
Just shy of 2 million to keep it operating as
Correct.
opposed to the 4.7. Okay.
Yeah,
So we could, if we, let's say we backed out that 2.7 million, I'm just rounding for easy math. How long before we have to start injecting funds into that property again?
next year.
Next year?
Yeah. So
And-
from what the consultant mentioned, when you're looking at the life cycle of the facility, anything that is required this year and you continue to push,
Yeah.
it's going to cause that facility to continue to deteriorate and have lower functioning value of the facility.
But it would be your recommendation that we expend the 4.7?
It would be my recommendation to do what's minimal to keep the facility operating until there's a decision by council on whether they want to build new or repair.
Okay, I understand. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about the phone at the pool. I mean, could that not be a dedicated cell phone on the deck?
It could be.
Yeah, so it shouldn't cost that much to dedicate a phone that's on the deck for a season. Okay, and the filtration system, 300,000 in 26, 27. That's nearing end of life or at end of life? Because it's not causing any problems right now, correct? You went all last year with no problems on the filtration system.
It would be hard to tell if we didn't have any issues because we kept having to restart the pump constantly every day. So once our facility is operating effectively, then we'll have a better understanding. But this is what was recommended by the consultant, was to put in a new filtration system to get it up to code.
Right, but what I go by is that there was no algae issues, no algae blooms in the water. So therefore, the filtration system must have been working.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director. Just to follow up on even what the CAO said at the beginning, and you and I have been discussing a strategic plan for recreation that we've all seen on emails. Is that part of the vision here? Is that where we're going to do strategic planning for, or we're going to sit with you, or because there was an ask for time and funds in order to get that plan done? Is that
For the
part of
recreation
this?
master
Yeah.
plan? The recreation master plan would be done through a consultant and would take in consideration from the entire community.
Right.
And those certain pockets of community as well. They gain a better understanding if this community is seeking more trails, more park space, an arena, a pool, whatever it might be. It's more to gain a broad understanding from the community of what it needs.
Yeah.
And then how we invest money into the community to meet those needs. Instead of sitting up here and saying, this is what we think we want.
Yeah.
This is what we got back from the community to say this is what they need.
Right, because we've been doing, historically, like, all I've seen is the arena input, right? And then there might be, other opportunities for citizens to say, yes, we want these things, but they tend to be item specific, is that correct? Whereas this would be kind of a larger thing?
Correct.
What would that, I think, did you get a figure in mind, or?
Wolfville is looking at one for $100,000. I think is what the consultant fees were.
Which would be an operational cost.
It would be, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, I appreciate that.
I think, Mr. Gerard, you had your hand up, did you? Is there something you wanted to add?
When Director Ryan was speaking to your.
Come on up here if you want to,
Come on,
yeah.
Nick.
Okay. So, with regard to the filtration system last year, the only real problem we experienced, as Director Langell outlined, was the leaking. But that actually kind of helps the point that you're making of the algae problems. A leaky pool is a clean one because it's constantly having domestic water. So those issues would be mitigated by a failing plumbing system. And also, I went back and forth with the consultant further. There is gonna be measures taken in the construction of the pool deck. They're gonna do some pavers around where the piping is, so that can be changed out, because what we're looking at is if the filtration system is upgraded to modern standard, great. But then you have to change all the piping, because the piping has to be fitted to facilitate that kind of flow. So the piping is being fixed this year because it's failing and we could have a serious liability. Like, let's say we do all of these repairs and then the plumbing system fails in a way we can't operate. Like, we kinda gotta back ourselves with that this year, but that will be upgraded in future years.
Okay, so we don't know where the leak is, though?
No, we don't.
So we don't know if it's in the filtration system or if it's in a pipe that you're gonna see when you dig it up?
It is most certainly in the piping.
Yes.
The question mark at this point, going forward, is the main drain, which sucks water off the bottom of the pool and is meant to clean debris from the bottom of the pool. That's part of the filtration system. The other part is the skimmers and jets that go around. They draw and they re-inject water. The main drains go through the actual pool tank itself. Replacing the main drains would be very extensive. You'd basically have to destroy the pool tank. Those of you familiar with the pool recall those two lines kind of coming down the wall in the deep end. Those have been enclosed now as per code. Those will not be replaced with the work taking place. It is very likely that it's in the piping around the edge of the pool because there's way more fittings. They're tied into those skimmers, joints, things of that nature. Kind of vulnerable parts. It's likely in there. But the main drains will not be replaced. If the leak is in the main drain, not likely, we will still leak this year. So that's what we know to this point.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one more question, about the rink. I struggle with this a little bit because I remember when we met with the consultants last, I don't know when it was, April or May last year in this room. I think they said we probably had 5 or 6 years if we just kind of left things at status quo. So let's pretend that the condenser's under warranty and it's fixed and we're back up. Could we, I know you can't answer this question because anything can happen in any given time, right?
Yeah.
We could probably go in a good situation another year because I'd hate to inject a few $1 million into this place before we've really made a decision if we want to keep it there. Well, council has we haven't even come to that conversation yet, right? And we don't know what's going to happen on a project with the county and hopefully at where that's going to go. And I think, I guess I'm looking for a little bit of feedback. I know the recommendation has things in it that we should do, but I guess we could go another year likely. We could still open and operate next year. If the condenser was there now, we'd be open, right? Right
Yes.
now, today.
So what I would say is, without the condenser, we'd be operating.
Right.
The other issue is the electrical issue, which we're having Nova Scotia take a look at, because it is original to the building. It's 20, 30 years past life.
Yep.
And we are seeing some scary signs around it, where we lost power the past few years. So once we get that assessment, we'd have a much better understanding from Nova Scotia Power of what is actually needed, and what say we're fixing distribution panels, if we have to fix those, we may have to fix other issues with the electrical in different parts of the facility as well. So it could have that secondary effect on other projects based on what comes back from them. But we want to do that due diligence first with them to get a better understanding.
Okay, and when do you anticipate that'll come back?
We're booked for Wednesday.
Oh, you're booked for Wednesday, okay. All right, okay, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Oh, Councillor Maxwell.
Yeah, just one other question. We were talking about strategic plan for recreation. There was a needs assessment done not very long ago because regional recreation facilities using that needs assessment. Can that needs assessment not form part of the strategic planning for recreation because it's already gone through public input? Public input was given during that needs assessment. So why would we do that again?
Are you referring to the regional center? Or?
Well, we had one done here in town not very long ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
It could, but we do have a changing demographics in the community. Like I would feel like it would be valuable to get a better understanding of, if we have AVMBA coming to us and asking for $100,000 every year, is that really the best use of our funds right now? My perspective is we want to keep what we have going at a bare minimum and then look to build out right from there. Me personally, from our department, we would like to have a recreation master plan to help guide the future of recreation in this community. This community is very lucky to have the assets that they have in this town. It's like many of you have said around the table that recreation is proud of the town of Kentville. We like to keep it that way. So we do feel if we can get that recreation master plan, we can continue to build off that. And then make those tough decisions in the future about the arena, with the pool, trails, park spaces, all those things.
I do agree with you that we need to look after what we have before we start building out and adding more capacity, because I think the people in our town expect us to look after what we have and not lose what we have. So, okay, thank you.
I guess no more questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Hopefully that'll be helpful. A lot of the Q&A happening in the middle, so you have more context and your questions answered around the content of the expenditure. We're going to move into talking about how that's being funded and what the impact of that funding, those funding sources may look like. I've also included this sanitary sewer budget request. If there's any questions on that in particular, perhaps we could take those now. And
Okay.
if there are none, we'll move to the next slide.
Any questions for the director on sanitary sewer? I guess you can keep rolling.
Great. Director Bell and I are off the hook on that one. Great. From a financing point of view, you can see in our 5-year plan, if you can, hopefully the type is big enough, that we are putting forward 56.4% of our financing through debt. We have, as you can see, about capital reserves in the purple on the lower right-hand side is 6.7%. And then there's a significant amount from federal, ICIP, GIF, along with our CCBF, lots of acronyms, but CCBF would be Canada Building Fund. I always get one C, I can never remember, which you may have heard called the gas tax in the past. So there's a significant amount of financing that is either 100% covered or a cost-sharing arrangement over the course of the plan. But you can see that there is an uptick in using debt instead of reserves over the course of that 5 years. If we focus in on the current year, we have 49.5% moving forward for debt. And we have about 7.6 for capital reserve for kind of, what I guess about 4 o'clock. And then we have our large infrastructure support for the Donald Lee Hiltz expansion. That's why the provincial ICIP is 10.8 and the federal is 13 overall. And then significant funding in the CCBF and gas tax. You'll also see other as 9. Those are, my colleagues have mentioned, we've applied for grants, the FRIP, the grid. We have other grants which I've included in as opportunities that we are seeking out in the document that was pre-circulated. So there are other funds that we are reaching out to see if we may qualify over the course of the 5-year plan. The one that I would highlight that our Strategic Initiatives Coordinator did locate is the Legacy Fund from the Department of Canadian Heritage. So when we talk about arena renovations or arena requirements of the course of 5 years, they will give 50% funding, but to a maximum of $500,000. So there's very little large-scale financing available for those major renovations that we have included for our recreation assets. We are increasing our reliance on debt. That is partially because we have reserves that are being depleted. So the amount that we put in reserves last year as a percentage of our own generated revenue, source revenue, is 5.1%, and about 5% of what we're projecting our expenditures to be. And it is about 40% of what our annual amortization or depreciation is. So our depreciation and our financials would suggest that's the amount of useful life we've expended for our assets for that year, because we amortize them over 10, 20, 50, 75 years, depending on what the accounting life is, and expense a portion of that every year, assuming that that is the amount of that we would need to replenish at some point, if you could look at it that way, because that is how much that is expiring. We're going to have to put that money aside. Some organizations and CAO and his financial expertise may have a better way to explain that. But in some of our surrounding municipalities, they put aside their accumulated depreciation, which would be the full amount of depreciation every year they put aside in a reserve. We do not do that. Ours is about 40% of that amortization. So just to give you a sense that we do have reserves, but they aren't really sufficient to rely on. We have also, as I said in the beginning, are looking for lots of grant opportunities and other partnerships, but we don't have some of these are not secured yet. We're feeling hopeful and confident in some, but if they aren't secured, we would likely need to delay or hope that some other opportunity presents itself before we have to put shovel to ground. And we're going to talk about debt ratio, which Councillor Savage had asked a question around. So I do have that data to provide. I wanted to share for 25-26, just so you could see as a percentage what the funding sources are. So you can see we have the 73.33% shared for Donald E. Hiltz. We have the sharing for our active transportation work that will happen to finish off that grant over the next 2 years. We are seeking 50% shared funding. I think that's the FRIP, if I got that right, for stormwater. We have the trunk roads, as Director Bell mentioned, which is a 50% funding for those costs. And for pool, we are hoping to have supports provincially and with other partners at 50%. So about 37% of what we put forward, we're finding cost sharing opportunities, but the other 63%, which you can see really relate to the arena repairs and equipment and a small amount for the flood mitigation, we would really be relying on either reserves, or sorry, on debt, those that are debt. Those are the other pieces that we're relying on debt for. Everything else would be through reserves for the most part. So we're not really going against the discussion we had last year, which was as much as we can utilize debt for cost sharing opportunities and try not to rely on debt 100% for just regular renewals of assets. So that was to demonstrate that we really are trying to, as much as we can, to adhere to that.
We've got a couple questions here. Do you want to take them now, or do you want to keep?
I can take them now if you wish. I was going to go in. We can speak to individual balances of where we are for reserves and for debt. If you'd like to ask your question now, or will that answer the question?
Maxwell.
Yeah, you mentioned I forget the name of it actually, it's like a heritage grant for the rink.
Yeah.
Would that not apply for the pool as well, because the pool is actually older than the rink?
I'm looking to our strategic initiatives coordinator.
We'll get a concrete answer.
Okay, they'll get a concrete answer. No pun intended. Yes. Yes.
saying
Yeah,
that
it's,
they're
it's a good point.
So
Good point.
they should
Potentially, yep, great.
Perfect, okay.
We'll make a point of that. So this slide is showing where we are for our reserve balances. At the end of 2025, we are projecting to be a 1.2 million, or sorry, 25-26, at 1.2 million for general reserves. We have an equipment reserve that we had agreed to increase the assignment from operations into that reserve last year substantially to get us to the end of the 5-year request for equipment. We have a few more items coming through engineering and public works, which, as you can see, will cause that to be in a negative by 26-27. Our reserves for general at 1.2, but going to a negative 83,000 in 27-28 based on the plan. Our deed transfer tax, we're hoping to be at 375 at the end of this fiscal year, at the beginning of next year. We have included 500,000 assumption each year. If sales stay with where they would be on a 10 and a 20-year past average, taking out the 2 or 3 COVID years. So taking out that blip, it's somewhere between 410,000 and 550. So we're presuming of $500,000 each year, up to 27-28. Kentville Futures was a balance that last year by motion council said we wanted to keep that as a contingency in case something comes up. So that $500,000 contingency is in there. So this is where our balances, we would expect them to be if we continue to put from operating amounts into the reserves at the same rate that we did in the current 24-25 budget. So when I talk about we are relying more on debt and not reserves, some of that was because what I heard from council when we put forward deed transfer tax, the decision was we wanted it to be used for capital. There was dialogue that if we can, we want to try and not use it for day-to-day capital replacement. So you will see throughout this plan, by 27-28, you will have to use a small portion of that if everything is approved as it stands for the course of the 5 years, unless there's some other grant opportunities that pop up. So that is reserves. For those, our sand sewer review reserves are as you can see, 94,000 ending in 27-28 at close to the same amount, and the same for the depreciation reserve. So that budget, we do put amounts in for depreciation each year for the value of the asset depreciation to cover future replacements. The Canada Building Fund, you can see there was an opening balance. We expect to receive about 480,000 each year, and we will go into a bit of a negative there, presuming we don't get any increase. We have received about 40,000 increase in the last year, so my expectation is that will be positive at the end, but if we get the same amount, we will have to find a little bit there to finish up those projects. That is the reserve section where we are over the course of this plan. From a debt perspective, our assumptions around debt is that we will finance over 10 or 20 years. Last year's plan, we did 10 for everything, so it was very conservative. To do 10 for everything this year was millions in principal paid by 29-30 that were not feasible. Not that 1.9 million at 2030 is necessarily feasible, but it's much more palatable than a 10-year loan. So those are done at anything 20 years and younger at a 10-year, and anything greater than 20-year at a 20-year repayment plan. You can see what 2025's projections are at 937,000 in principal paid, moving at the end of the plan to 1.9 million. So it would be about a 5.7 times increase for overall. Principal is about 2.1 times where it was before. Because if you look at the debt, ending debt, we'd go from 5 million to a projected 25 million at the end of 2030. So it is fairly significant, the amount of interest over the course of the debt. 5-year debt plan would go from 149,000, it isn't on that slide, up to 856,000 at the end of 2030. That would be what we would need from operating to cover, so interest moving that and 937 to 1.9. So to answer your earlier question, Councillor Savage, we would be looking at an operating impact for 425 was almost 1.1 million, to 2030 to be 2.8. So we'd have to come up with 1.7 million over the life of this plan to address the repayment of the debt through operations. If we look at 25, 26, we'd be going from 1 million, the 1.1 to 1.15. So it's marginal for the next 2 years, because when we take out debt in a current year, it's issued the following May, and then you make an interest payment, but you don't make your principal till the next year. So it takes a couple of years really to catch up.
Oh, till the ensuing year?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So end of this fiscal for 25, the issue will be in May. We'll pay interest in November, and we don't start paying payments till the following year. So it does take a little bit for that plan to catch up. So when I've presented here what the debt would look like in 30, I projected and said, well, what does 31 look like for our principal payments? Well, our principal payments would go up another 200 and some thousand. Our interest would go up another 100,000. So because we'd have some debt dropping off, new debt going on. I have included in the assumptions that were provided previously what the assumptions were for debt. So these were done based on what the fall issue was, and Treasury, Finance and Treasury Board provided those numbers for us. So they did the kind of what if scenarios for us and gave us what those would look like, which was very helpful. So we know based on what we're borrowing at now, these would be the actual payments over the life of that those assets. The overall, we did provide a debt per capita. Our population in the last census was 6,630. So you see our debt would go from $777 this year up only to $786 next year. But when those principal and interest payments really kick in 27, it'd be up to $2,000. At the end of this plan, it'd be $3,800 per capita. Our debt service cost, and that is the ratio that is monitored provincially, would go from a green of 6.7 to a red of 16% at the end of the plan. Low risk is below 10, moderate risk 10 to 15, as you can see, and high is greater than 15. Certainly, those are indicators of the results of your decision. If we're high, we may be high, make that decision that it's okay to be high in debt for a couple of years because we know we need to make a strategic expenditure and have a plan for how we bring it back down. It doesn't mean it's a bad decision as long as it's something that we are prepared for and know how we're going to move ourselves back from the red to the yellow. I guess would be my perspective, unless C.O. Matheson has a different perspective that he'd like to share. So that is the impact that that has on our debt ratio. And I do have a slide for our reserve balances and where they sit. So I'm going to go to that, and then I will come back because I expect there are questions on these two. So from an operating ratio point of view, it looks at, which is another provincial indicator that council and staff monitor. That would be, that would be staying in the moderate. We're forecasting 11.3, which is on the low end of moderate, and we'd be moving up to the mid-range of moderate by the end of 2030. Mainly those changes are because that calculation looks at the amount of reserves that we have in comparison to the amount of revenue that we generate ourselves. And we are including revenue projections, as I noted, they're modest, at 2% and 1%. And they include the same reserve transfers that we would have done in the past. So there are amounts within the operating budget to move into operating reserve every year in the range of a couple $100,000. So we presume those will continue to go, but we also presume at the end of the 4 years in 2028, there'll be an election and that reserve will be removed. And so all of those have been factored in to come to those numbers. So that is where we sit. It's moving up a little bit, but not out of the yellow, which is a positive. So I'll go back to the debt schedule. I expect that we'll have more questions around it.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor, through the chair to Director Matthews. So I think when you talked about some of the assets that could be amortized like over 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, what's the longest that a debenture can go?
We have traditionally, what I see is 20 years. I'm not sure if we can go further than 20. CAO may be aware of that.
You would have to, it would be pretty rare.
Yeah.
That you'd go beyond that?
Yeah, it would be a very, you'd be talking about a very significant project with a very significant, because your maintenance, even if it's fairly new, your maintenance costs start to kick in.
Right.
You really don't want to go much any further than that if you can help it.
Okay.
And the interest mounts up, quite frankly, too.
Right, and you're assuming an interest rate of, I think it was 4.03?
4.03, which is overall.
So if there's something that you thought about amortizing over a 10-year period, could you go 20 years on that asset with, let's just say at the end of 5, you have more of an influx of revenue or whatever, and you could do a balloon payment at that?
Right.
No, I see you saying, you're shaking your head. I can see
I'm
even.
not.
I'm thinking I'm asking.
So just to explain the 10 and 20. So what we did is we looked at every addition that we've put forward.
Right.
So if, so the condenser, if the condenser's useful life for accounting purposes is 10 years.
Yes.
Then we wouldn't want to amortize the debt over 20 years because we'll have to replace it in 10. We'll still owe 10 years on the condenser and we'll have to pay for a new one. So what we've done is said all of the assets that have an accounting useful life of 20 years or below will amortize over 10. The ones that have 20 years, we could move them to 20 years.
Yes.
However, if they start to deteriorate more quickly, then we would end up with a replacement asset and debt on an asset that may not be working.
But if you
so
could
20 is a bit of a risk.
But if you could amortize them over 20 and with maybe a potential of doing a balloon payment after 10 or a balloon payment on it after 12.
So we would have to do a 10-year with a balloon payment at the 10-year and then maybe amortize that over 5.
Do you have to choose that though at the commencement of it?
Yes.
You have to design it such that
there's a balloon payment coming due, and then you have the choice when you, a few months in advance of making the payment, to ask to refinance that balloon payment. Yes.
Okay.
So we could.
Okay.
For
so
those that
that's
are
doable.
20, we could.
Yep, okay.
Yep.
And that probably, I'm not gonna say probably, that potentially could, if we did that, it could potentially take us out of the red and put us back in, no. It would still.
Again, is there gonna be some big cash inflow to meet that balloon payment? Unlikely.
I don't know, we didn't know about the ones that came forward from, the last few years with, those were quite sizable, those last few years.
But those are usually being used for something else quite often. They're tied to a condition of some other project as opposed to making a balloon payment.
So if I look at anything that has a useful life over the course of this whole 5-year plan that is exactly 20 years, the value is 1.5 million.
Okay.
So it's not significant.
No, okay.
Wait 1 second. I misspoke. Just give me a minute. There was a filter on my spreadsheet. That was only for the arena. 20 years. 5 million over the course of the full plan.
Over the course of the full plan?
Yeah,
Okay.
the 2 million was just for the arena.
Right, okay.
Yeah. So that is potentially an option that would impact the requirements on the operating fund over the,
Yeah. And I think in terms of like, not a deluge of tax revenue coming in, but presumably there will be substantive growth over the ensuing years as the Hiltz Collector opens, as some of these new subdivisions come into play, that Bryson's doing and or Encore or whomever is doing them. I'm just thinking in terms of that. Perhaps it won't be sizable over the next few years. I hope it will be, but that's just sort of where my head's at.
and we were conservative in saying 5% is what we have for 26.
Yes, yeah.
And then 2 and then 1. We don't know where assessment values will go.
For sure, yeah,
So-
okay,
But there
thanks.
is a potential for
Yeah.
that,
Okay.
for upcoming years.
Okay, that's helpful, thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Director. Hoping that I could get a copy of those spreadsheets again, so I could look at them, because it's difficult to see them from over here.
The PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Absolutely, it'll
Thank
be on
you.
your SharePoint site at the end of after the
Okay,
meeting.
great, because when I see the original graphic there, our existing debt service ratio is about what? Was it shy of 50 or
Trying to get back.
at 50?
No, 7 or 8, I think.
You can put it back up there.
The service ratio is different than.
Service,
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay, but what was our existing debt responsibility as far as revenue? How much revenue we have and how much money we have to pay out in debt? That's what I'm looking for.
how much revenue do we have? I'm not quite sure how to answer.
So we take in money?
Yep,
Obviously there are different
Yep.
streams, and I'm a novice at this.
Yep.
And from that, we have to finance existing debt.
so.
Sorry, it's already been financed, we just have to pay for it.
Correct.
That's what the debt service ratio is.
Okay, so right now I see a 6.7 for 2025. What
Correct.
is it for 2024, please?
Oh.
In around there, wasn't it?
I think it
Not
was.
far off, yeah.
It's not that different.
It's not that different?
2024, I have it right here in front of me, 7.3.
7.3,
So
so
it's
it's
a
actually
little
going
bit
down.
higher because of the amount of revenue that we have anticipated coming in. So the debt ratio
Is that because of
is based on how much interest and principal we repay, as well as how much of our own source revenue we're gonna have. So we have, last year, our revenue went up significantly. Our revenue went up from 14.7 million to 16.2
And that's due
in
to
our debt-
assessments? Or is that
due to assessments.
Yeah,
As well as other sources like grants in lieu and fines and interest and those kinds of things. But our debt payment went from 1,080,900 to 1,086,846. So it was very little change in our debt, but a significant influx of revenue.
but what we're projecting here is over the next 5 years to, how do you say that? When I see the per capita debt ratio going from 777 to
3,800.
13, that's, in my calculations, that's more than 5 times.
For the per capita debt, yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
and we're talking about a assessment increase or revenue increase of, you said 2 and 1%?
We were very conservative because it can go down as well. It just
Yeah.
depends. If we have a recession and housing values plummet, it can go down. And we're just feeling the economic uncertainty and I didn't want to be hopeful and then come back to say, you've made a decision that suggests we spend X number of dollars expecting this amount of revenue stream and we didn't make it.
So can I ask, go right back to the beginning of your presentation, and I apologize for not asking this sooner, but it seems that you said we're back to less than 2019 rates, is that accurate?
Correct.
So why is it we have not continued to increase? Why did we go down? Was there
I wasn't-
a decision made by council to
Council
reduce
around.
taxes, or was there?
I don't think the taxes have gone down, right? Not in my time, they weren't, yeah. We'll give you the, yeah, hold on. Deputy Mayor Kroll?
That could be the municipal mill rate that's gone
Yes,
down.
it's
It's not, the tax rate in total has stayed the same.
Right.
but there are various area rates that go,
Yeah.
that are mixed into that as
Yeah.
well, that add to the municipal rate.
Correct.
So it's not necessarily that the rate, the total rate hasn't gone down or up. It's stayed the same. It's just that the mix of all those area rates in there changed based on data at that time.
Right. But the area rates, we don't keep. Those just
Right.
flow out to others. The piece that we get to keep, that we can use for our operating expenditures, are the numbers that we provided, which, as the deputy mayor says, would be that base mill rate.
If you would permit, I'd love to dig into that with you, if you would permit, and not waste council's time on that. Building my understanding is important,
Yep.
but I don't want to waste
Yep.
council's time.
You know, when you look on your tax bill,
Yeah.
you'll see the different things that are on there, so as
I don't claim to understand those.
Yeah.
as a
So-
tax rate, we haven't, in the 4 years I was on, they were never changed. Might have, if I remember following, did the term before you guys made a change?
Yeah.
7 or 8 years
Yeah,
ago maybe?
21, 22, I don't know what the overall rate was, I just have the base mill
Okay.
rate. It was 140.81, and then in 22, 23, it went to 14262, which it is still at that. So for the last 3 years, it's been 0.4262. There's a hydrant area rate, there's a fire area rate, and there's an economic levy in combination with this that make the full tax rate.
Okay, is that
So
where the
sometimes-
mill rate comes in?
That's that
Again, I'd love
base or
to
mill
dig
rate,
in.
yeah.
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 But
Thank you.
just there's different municipalities take different view on that.
Yes.
Some leave the mill rate the same and let the area rates fluctuate, because
Which is-
it's turned out, it's not your
Which is what we've
operation.
done.
Yeah.
In
the
this
last 3
case,
years.
they've looked at the total tax burden as a total rate and
Yeah.
have adjusted that way. So some-
Total
yeah.
tax.
But
So
in the
it's-
last 2 years or 3 years, we've kept that mill rate the same and allowed the overall tax rate to fluctuate. So, yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. I was just wondering, you mentioned somewhere in there that by the time we get to 2030, we would need $1 million or $2 million or something to bring that back in line, or do we know like how much we would need to save or to input to bring the red to a yellow by 2030?
Yeah, well, I did some scenarios here. If we were to look at trying to get it to, say, 9%, which would get us just under or you mean to get it into the 10 to 15?
Yeah, in the
So
2030.
let's say we wanted to get it to 12%.
Yeah.
We currently are showing, projecting 17.9 million in revenue. We would need to have 19.5 million.
So 2 million, that would be the
Correct.
difference? Okay.
Yeah.
So,
More to get it to 12, which is about the middle of that moderate. It's the only scenario I did to get it to.
so if I gave you $2 million,
Yes.
then that would change, that red would
Correct.
change to yellow.
Correct.
Per year.
2
You
years.
need 2 million and 25, 2 million 26 per year?
Well, yeah, in those years, those later years, yeah,
Yeah.
it's not a one-time thing, it's,
It
Okay.
would need to keep.
you need
you'd
a
to
revenue
keep
stream.
A revenue stream for
Of
$2
$2 million
every year
for,
from that year forward for it to stay.
Okay.
Yeah. And for, from a assessment value, we're taxed based on our assessment values for every $100 in assessment value. And when we look at, say, what would a 1 cent tax rate increase be? So if we were to do a 1 cent increase to offset some of these for commercial and residential only, it would be about $77,000 in extra revenue. So it
Okay.
would take a rather substantive
Increase.
You also
increase
have the
in
cap that-
taxes
Right.
to actually offset that $2 million in revenue.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that could, I mean, there's many streams that we could do, right? Reduce costs,
Oh,
increase
yes,
tax
right,
rate.
Right, and we
We know
never
this is
go right to the
conservative.
budget every
No,
time,
No,
so.
we don't.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
And showing the 5 years out is mainly, for me, on the debt side, is because it takes, there's a lag in when you start to see the impact of your decision. So 31 and 32, you're still seeing the impact of the decision of anything that's debt in the current 5-year plan. Because it's 7 years before the full amount is seen.
Do you have another question, Deputy Mayor Kroll, or? Yes, go ahead.
I didn't even ask a question. I answered a question. My question surrounds the $8 million, is it, that we're looking at? $8.4 million you're looking at borrowing this year, and then, of course, it adds up to $27 million over the life of this 5-year plan. My question is, has this whole program been inserted into the Nova Scotia Municipal Finance Corporation debt affordability model?
Not yet.
I'm wondering whether the town actually has the capacity to borrow this much money. Has that been factored in?
I've had initial conversations with Treasury Board, and they are more than happy to do the number crunching, but there wasn't a concern at this point. But I didn't give them all of those numbers yet.
Well, it's just we owe 5.1 million.
Correct.
At the end of 26, and we're looking to add another 9 million to it, so we're looking at a $13 million.
13.7 by 27. Yeah.
I just want to make sure that we're being reasonable with our borrowing limits, and that we know exactly what we're getting into. At the end of the day, the province would be looking at us closely, I would think, at 16% debt service ratio. So we've typically tried to keep our debt service ratio, on the high at 12%, and the low, and you see the lows because we haven't been borrowing nearly as much money as we had in the past, say, 4 or 5 years. But I caution council to think about the fact that you sign up for this much debt, that it's going to tie our hands on the operating side. And we're going to have to find either new revenue streams, cut services, or raise taxes. And none of those things really appeal to me right now, but we'll have to think about what we're going to do. But I guess it's the capacity, whether we have that capacity that we can borrow that much money. That's a lot of money for a small town of 6,600 people.
Councillor Maxwell.
Yeah, and just on top of what the Deputy Mayor says, we have been trying to keep this down low over the years, and not just in my years, but beyond my years. And we see the results of that now with recreation facilities not up to snuff, with roads not up to snuff, with sanitary sewer not in our storm sewer not up to snuff. So the more that we continue to delay this kind of spending, the more we go backwards. And so, you know, when I look at it, okay, we're in a position right now of losing our rink, of losing our pool, of having kilometers and kilometers of roads not paved properly, of floods and situations like that going on in the town. And that's not just from my 8 years, this goes back. And so this to me looks like a 5-year plan that might put us on track with some of these facilities and so on. And it's one that we can kind of go along with. We might experience some pain. Residents might have to put up with a tax increase. But I think we've held it so long that we're going backwards. And unless residents want us to continue to slide backwards, which I don't think they do, there's going to be some pain. And that's what I'm seeing. Am I correct? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I brought us back to this sheet. This is our 25-26. So the portion of the 8 million that Deputy Mayor Kroll mentioned. So if we look at the dollar values, and also in your package, you had a schedule that had 25-26 capital expenditures with financing. So much of that, if you exclude the arena, is the provincial, our share of any provincial or federal and provincial dollars. So in engineering and public works, 3.4 million is there for debt. 337,000 of that is the street sweeper that was already tendered, and it was initially to be paid for through debt, which could come out of reserves if we're comfortable using the transfer tax reserve for that. The rest of the items that are there are all our 26.67% or our 50% share. And if we move to Parks and Recreation, the debt is all pool at 250,000, and if we are successful in our grant applications, there's a potential that may be lessened or eliminated, and 4.7 million of that 8 million is for the arena. And I think Mayor's question to Director Langell would suggest that we may be able to spend 2 million, potentially less, which would bring that $8 million even smaller for the upcoming year, if that is something that council would like us to investigate. But unless we really say that we're grateful for your contribution, province and feds, but we can't afford the 26-cent dollar or the 50-cent dollar, it's going to be hard to avoid that 8 million for sure.
Councillor Maxwell.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, like, we do have really tough decisions to make, and yes, there is a consequence for the decisions that we do make. 3 of us sat around this table 8 years ago when I proposed the deed transfer tax. We calculated that up last year, that we lost $2 million by not making that decision at that time, which would have gone a long way through these last few years. So it is very important. We have to look at, in my opinion, you know, where are we taking this town? Are we moving it forward? Or are we going to continue to slide backwards? Thank you.
Okay.
So from staff's point of view, I guess we've given, I think, hopefully a lot of detail in advance, and we're able to answer your questions today around the rationale for the requests and the potential for funding. We've talked about debt utilization. We, I think, have identified the impact around our borrowing. We can do some further work around our debt capacity, which I've already initiated with Department of Treasury Board, and can bring that back to council. We know that there's operating impact and we need to keep some flexibility into the future, but I am cognizant of the comments of council around why we're in the position that we're in. We know that reserves, that will be challenging to increase our operating reserve, just given what our revenue increases are from taxes at a flat tax rate, won't be sufficient to cover operating and capital increases. We don't necessarily have, as we've all talked about, overall strategic priorities, whether it's from a recreation master plan, our stormwater master plan, or council strategic priorities. So for us, we really need your direction and guidance around next steps, and how do you want us to, what I'm hearing is we're not going to be approving a budget this evening. So then how would you like us to go away and provide further information? Do you have debt utilization levels that are more comfortable? Are there reserve pieces? So when we talked about deed transfer, should we say we can use that, less debt? Are there any guidance that you have for us right now to go back and bring forward a revised package to you? And CIO Matheson may have something else he'd like to add, but that's the guidance that I would need to give you the information to make a decision.
Yeah, I think the discussion has highlighted some of, you know, what we're seeing here is, I'll draw the analogy when we're talking about rates. In a regulated environment, which you have one regulated environment, which is your water utility. So in your water utility, for example, you are required to put cash away in reserve equal to your depreciation expense every year. You don't have a choice. And you haven't been doing that in your general operating for many years now. So that is why we talk about, why we're looking at sort of this infrastructure deficit, if you will, if you'd been doing that, there would be hopefully money to do a kilometer of streets every year, whether there's outside funding or not, because that was always the expectation from the provincial government. You're responsible for streets, deal with it. But if you're not putting away that money every year to deal with it, it comes back and gets you. And that's, with some of the other facilities, yes, there are outside sources of revenue and that, but that more or less, all that covers is the difference between what you originally paid and what inflation has done in the meantime. That's all that outside funding is doing. So again, it highlights the importance of putting aside funding equal to your depreciation expense. So that's something I think we need to, that's one thing I would recommend, and it's a difficult decision at operating time, but.
Is that something that, sorry?
Just, yeah, we're gonna let him finish and then you can put your
Yeah,
light
no,
on if you have a question.
that was my main comment, and then, so I'm just asking you to sort of think about that when we're talking about, yeah, we would like to keep that debt ratio from a staff perspective. We don't want to get in the red, it's just as much as, and we know you don't, so I mean, let's work together at that, so we'll be looking at some things there. But there may be a couple years you run up close at some point, but it's just, we've always got to keep that 5, 6, 7 years in front of us, looking ahead of what it's doing to us. And then the reserve levels, that just comes back to my comment about the depreciation. Again, we got to start building up reserves so we can pay as we go for more of this capital work, particularly on rehabilitation of existing assets. You can always get funding for something bright and shiny and new, but there's not usually much money available to fix what's getting old. That's, anyone that's ever done a lot of fundraising for anything can tell you that. You can go out and the community will go out and raise all kinds of money for you to build a new arena, but are they going to go out and help fundraise to do repairs? Probably not. So that's again, something to keep in mind. So that's, and again, the big thing is priorities. Do you want us to prioritize existing assets versus new? Do you want us to have a serious look at the medium and low priorities if they're not funded? Or even if they have, small amounts of funding, we can look at those, but we're just looking for some indication from you, and we'll go back and try to make things look a little better.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Mayor, through you to Director Matthews. So with respect to the slide presentation that you're going to put that on SharePoint, so I think that will be helpful. And I think that maybe doing a little bit of sort of sensitivity analysis around if we went to the 20-year instead of the 10, if we maybe reduce the arena by whatever it was, 2 million, or reduce it down to 2 million from the 4.7. Just a few things like that. So I guess my ask would be, like, when we have some of those ideas and we've sort of put them to paper, would it be in order, Mayor, for us to send those directly to Director Matthews, or should we, how do we want to proceed at this point?
I'm going to speak to that in a minute.
Okay.
Do you have any other questions for Director
Not for me,
Matthews?
no.
Okay, all right.
No.
Deputy Mayor Kroll.
Excuse me, yes, thank you very much. I'm not sure what the deed transfer tax reserve is being held for. I wasn't on council, so I don't know what the purpose of maintaining that reserve for.
The policy statement that was drafted last year was for council's request was that it be used for capital purposes only. There wasn't any more limitations put on it. However, the discussion around the chamber was that we would prefer that it be used for a large-scale project such as a new regional rec center or something to that effect. But my impression was we didn't want to embed that in policy because we didn't want our hands tied in case we needed to make a different decision.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I presumed not to use that for anything without discussion at this table.
Did you still have a question?
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay.
When it comes to the deed transfer tax, we saw a rate of about 500,000 per year as an increase. Are we assuming that Kentville's going to multiply its sales ratio by that much?
The 500,000 is in there as an annual, just an amount we would receive, not an increase each year, having it steady at 500,000 over the 4 years.
So that was showing that reserve building?
Yeah.
Okay, but if
Yeah.
we spend it at 500,000, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah, I assumed we weren't gonna spend it for anything
Okay,
over the
unless
course of
we-
the plan. Given, and I know we have a few councillors who were here
Yeah.
last time, but that was my recollection of council discussion.
Correct, yeah.
Yes. Great, yeah. So it went up from 375 this year, because we have a partial year, to 500,000 for ensuing years based on a 10 and 20-year average, excluding the high sale COVID years. Yeah, you're welcome.
Any other questions? So I think, first of all, I just want to thank the staff and the directors. I know that's a lot of work. Just by looking at all those pages, I know, I can only imagine. So we definitely appreciate all of that. I think based on today's meeting, the best thing really is for us to go home now. We've absorbed it. Look at those slides again, and we will plan another meeting to follow up. I've never been a fan of passing a budget in the same meeting. I've never liked that. And anybody who watched the last 4 years with me, I always had a problem with that. So I think that's what I would recommend. If you have any questions for Director Matthews, I'm sure she'll take them. It'd be nice, though, when you send them, to copy all of council, then we're not sending the same question 7 times, and we all kind of, you may ask something that I didn't think to ask, or vice versa. And then we will, the CAO and I will schedule a subsequent meeting where we can keep working away at this. So, if there's nothing else, I will take a motion to adjourn. Councillor Andrew, and a seconder, Councillor Maxwell, thank you. Oh, sorry, let's pause.
I was just gonna ask if we could put a timeline on
Okay.
when we want questions to be, just so that we can make sure that, I think it would be helpful if people could give us questions
Okay.
by a certain time
Let's
frame,
see.
and then I'll try and answer them all
Okay.
at once, rather than one-off, if we could.
Let's say between now and next Wednesday, maybe, is that a good
Because
for
we
you?
have council next Monday.
We do, yeah,
Yeah.
on Monday, yeah. We'll say between now and, I don't even have a calendar in front of me.
Wednesday, we think would be April the
April the 2nd, okay.
Okay.
Not April Fools, no.
Okay.
Yes, go
Sorry,
ahead,
did
that's
that
okay.
Timeline for Kentville for getting budgets passed and moving forward, because we're into the next fiscal year in a week. How do we move forward without having a budget active? That's my question.
You can, some places, it's informally run on the prior year's budget as your estimates for dealing with the first few months. Although I have seen some towns will actually pass a provisional authorizing funding up to a flat amount that you must pass a budget by or extend and adding an additional amount to the budget. So I've seen like a 30% of the prior year's budget be approved at an early meeting in April, or we could even do it at March 31st at that meeting to say that, you're authorized to spend up to a certain percent of last year's budget.
Okay, but the timeline is we're looking at the end of April, end of May?
I think 1 year, I think Deputy Mayor Kroll told me that it wasn't done until September. Not that we want to do that, but.
No, we don't ever
But,
do that.
yeah, and there's been
Last
years
year-
we haven't done them in May. I think last year was
we did them
March,
in May. Yeah, we did.
The capital in
We
March.
approved the capital budget on March 26th
25th
or 25th.
of 2024, the reverse of today.
Yeah, and then our operating budget was approved, I believe. We presented it early May, and it was deferred until the end of June by council for approval, but it was presented early May. So our hope would be March and April to early May for both operating and capital.
Great, thank you.
So as close to year end as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
No, I apologize. but
No,
I
don't
just wanted to be able
apologize.
to manage,
And I appreciate all your
Getting
work
those
on this. Thank you
responses
very much.
back.
So we had a motion to adjourn, Councillor Andrew and Councillor Maxwell. All those in favor? We're adjourned at 6:13 PM. Thanks.